When India gained independence, the immediate task was engineering a functioning welfare state from scratch. The Constitution acts as the active blueprint for this construction, containing specific, coded instructions for socio-economic development. Those precise socio-economic instructions are housed entirely within Part 4, formerly known as the Directive Principles of State Policy. This logic model maps out the central legal paradox established right at the beginning in Article 37. The text explicitly states that these directives are not enforceable by any court. If the government fails to provide a living wage, a citizen cannot sue them for it. Yet the very same sentence introduces a direct legal requirement. It declares that these principles are fundamental in the governance of the country and makes it the duty of the state to apply them when making laws. To understand how the Indian state processes economic justice, social welfare, and environmental protection, we have to read through the master sequence of Articles 36 through 51 chronologically. This includes examining how consecutive parliaments patched and updated the system over decades. By removing judicial enforcement, the framers of the Constitution placed the survival and progress of the Indian welfare state on the political will of the legislature. Article 36 anchors Part 4 to the exact same broad definition of the state used in Part 3 for fundamental rights. This ensures that federal, state, and local governments are all equally bound by these upcoming directives. Because of the duty outlined in Article 37, Parliament and executive branches serve as the sole engines responsible for writing directives into actual enforceable law. Article 38 issues the first major mandate. The state must secure a social order infused with social, economic, and political justice, specifically demanding the elimination of inequalities in status, facilities, and opportunities. That mandate required a significant historical patch. In 1978, the 44th Amendment explicitly added Clause 2 to Article 38, placing a hard requirement on the state to strive to minimize the inequalities in income. Looking at this breakdown of Article 39, we see the Constitution's specific anti-monopoly guardrails. Clauses B and C command the state to distribute material resources to subserve the common good and prevent the economic system from concentrating wealth and the means of production. Clauses E and F then pivot to protect the health of workers and the tender age of children from economic abuse. The 42nd Amendment in 1976 tightened this further, substituting new language to ensure youth are protected against both moral and material abandonment. That same 1976 amendment introduced Article 39A. It directs the state to provide free legal aid. The goal is to guarantee that economic or other disabilities do not block any citizen's access to justice. Taken together, this first block of articles operates as a structural fail-safe against the inherent inequalities generated by a pure capitalist system. Article 40 shifts focus to decentralized governance. Drawing on Gandhian principles, it orders the state to organize village panchayats as autonomous units of self-government. This balance scale illustrates the exact limitation of Article 41. It secures the right to work, to education, and to public assistance in cases of unemployment or old age. However, these entitlements are strictly bounded by the state's actual economic capacity and development. Moving to the workplace, Article 42 demands that the state secure just and humane conditions of work, alongside specific provisions for maternity relief. Article 43 introduces a crucial distinction regarding wages. A basic minimum wage keeps a worker alive, but the text explicitly commands the state to endeavor toward a living wage, one ensuring a decent standard of life, complete with leisure and cultural opportunities. To sustain rural economies, Article 43 also tasks the state with promoting traditional cottage industries on an individual or cooperative basis. Article 43A, another addition from the 1976 amendments, takes labor protections a step further by mandating worker participation in the management of industrial establishments. These directives outline a clear intent to democratize power at both ends of society, political power in the villages and economic power on the factory floor. Article 44 steps into civil society, assigning the state the task of endeavoring to secure a uniform civil code for citizens throughout India. This timeline tracks Article 45. Originally, it required free education for children until age 14. The 86th Amendment shifted the 6 to 14 bracket out of Part 4, making it a fundamental right under Article 21A. Article 45 then targeted early childhood care below age 6. Next, Article 46 requires the state to actively promote the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of the people, specifically the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and to protect them from social injustice and exploitation. Article 47 establishes public health and the raising of the level of nutrition, such as state-sponsored school meal interventions, as among the primary duties of the state. The second half of Article 47 provides the constitutional basis for state-level prohibition, directing the government to endeavor to ban the consumption of intoxicating drinks and injurious drugs except for medicinal purposes. This sequence of articles provides the basis for state intervention in childhood development, nutrition, and the legal protection of vulnerable communities. Article 48 orders the state to organize agriculture and animal husbandry on scientific lines, preserving breeds and prohibiting the slaughter of cows and draft cattle. The 42nd Amendment introduced Article 48A, directly hard-coding the protection and improvement of the environment, forests, and wildlife into the state's duty roster. Article 49 creates an absolute obligation for the state to protect monuments, places, and objects of national importance from spoliation, destruction, or export. This diagram represents the critical architectural mandate of Article 50. The state must take active steps to separate the judiciary from the executive in public services, ensuring independent legal oversight. Finally, Article 51 establishes the bedrock of India's foreign policy. It commands the state to promote international peace, maintain honorable relations between nations, foster respect for international law, and encourage dispute settlement by arbitration. The final sequence scales the state's obligations outward, beginning with the soil and agriculture, moving to the protection of national history, and concluding with India's posture in international relations. Reading Part 4 from start to finish reveals an evolving, chronological master plan designed to bridge the gap between a pure political democracy and a functional economic democracy. The major amendments, the 42nd, 44th, and 86th, demonstrate that this text acts as a living system, receiving updates to its code as the demographic and economic needs of the nation scale up. This brings us back to the core paradox of Article 37. Because the judicial branch cannot mandate the execution of these principles, the burden of progress falls entirely on the legislature's willingness to act. A government cannot be sued for failing to achieve a perfectly equal society, but the Constitution makes it legally bound to try. Article 37 establishes that these directive principles are fundamental to the governance of the country. They serve as the constitutional standards that guide the legislative priorities and the long-term development of the Indian state.